Officials from the Judicial Service Commission are about to brief the media on the Chief Justice interview process so far. They're expected to provide direction on when and how briefings will take place between now and the conclusion of the deliberations scheduled for Saturday. Well, we are going to take you there a little bit later, but let's proceed. Judge President Dunstan Mlambo, Judge President of the Gauteng Division of the High Court, Dunstan Mlambo, is in the hot seat today as the Judicial Service Commission interviews candidates for the position of Chief Justice. Mlambo answered various questions pertaining to the law. One of the questions put to him was about some of his rulings and judgments that have been perceived to be in favour of President Cyril Ramaphosa and against former President Jacob Zuma. We are now going to link to that briefing by the JSC.
Which is just a brief update on any issues so that we don't have to be speaking to individual media houses. As you know, we're now on the third day or third candidate, and tomorrow will be the last candidate. Saturday deliberations, and then we will address you at that stage regarding whatever comes out of the deliberations. But before, if there are any issues that you might want to raise, we'll take one or two questions. But I'll ask Commissioner Tepe, who is my co-pilot here, to just address one issue which we have been asked on the WhatsApp.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Mpofu. This relates to a question that was asked yesterday about the apology from the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng. We just wanted to say, as Commissioner Mpofu said yesterday, the deadline is today and the day hasn't ended. So we can't be answering on to whether the former Chief Justice has responded or not. He still has until end of business today. And as we agreed yesterday, this is an issue we can only address tomorrow, if possible. Thank you, Commissioner Mpofu. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, anything?
So tomorrow, the fourth candidate that's expected to come, I just want clarity on whether people will attend physically or virtually, because there seems to be reports that...
Yes, I saw something on Twitter suggesting... No, our information is that he'll be attending physically. That's... in fact, yeah, if he was doing it virtually, we would have been informed, because obviously the office would have to make arrangements.
Dali, the interviews of the JSC are forensic exercises based on fact, evidence, complaints, etc. And usually the precedent is that a candidate is forewarned with the question that is going to be asked or the topics to be considered. I'm just wondering, with the instance of Judge President Mlambo, just for points of clarity, there are no complaints against him regarding sexual harassment. Can you confirm that firstly? Secondly, was he informed that that this line of questioning would take place?
No, there's no such thing as people being informed about line of questioning. What happens is that you have two different things. A complaint is one thing. A complaint, as you know, since our law has developed, it used to be that someone can just complain about a judge. But for obvious reasons, exactly because, people can just complain about anything founded or unfounded. It has now happened that we require an affidavit so that, to limit kind of unfounded complaints. That's one thing. The other thing is called an objection. That's a completely different thing. An objection is to the candidacy of the person. It may or may not sometimes coincide with a complaint, but it can come on its own. It comes from law bodies, individuals, litigants, or whatever. Then the third thing is questions from commissioners. Nobody gets forewarned about questions from commissioners. That comes either because of something that comes out of the PEC or general knowledge, or something that sometimes is even raised by the candidate themselves, sometimes up front. Yeah. So those things fall into three different categories. Particularly if the candidate says, well, I don't know anything about that, well, then you can't ask that. But if the candidate knows about it, then that's
Just a point of clarity, I just want to check. So if there's a complaint or there's an actual documentation, this is presented to the candidate?
No, absolutely. That's why we asked, if you remember, I can't remember the date now. In November, we issued a statement, both of us, to say that, to map out the entire process. And one of the things we said was that members of the public and professional bodies had until the 10th of January, which was a month. Remember, the candidates themselves had until the 10th to submit their questionnaires and CVs. Then we extended a month, 10th December to 10th January, for anyone to lodge objections, complaints, whatever you. That was done. So the reason why we said 10th January is because the interview starts on the 1st of February. It was exactly for what you're asking, so that in the intervening period, those would be conveyed to the candidates.
But the second half of my question was that, so a complaint is obviously presented to the candidate.
An objection, even an objection, yeah.
But a rumor need not be. Is that the position?
No, I mean, you had one of the commissioners, I don't want to mention names, said there was this thing about alleged kickbacks in the division. You've had questions here about so-called top six in the SCA. Those things have come here, and nobody. You don't have to write someone say, no, there's a rumor about a top six. If the person says, I don't know anything about top six, you can't ask them. But if they do, they do. That happens all the time. You've been here long enough to know that. Yeah.
But I think what we can confirm is that we're not aware of any complaint or objection relating to sexual harassment of the JP. That's what you're raising, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, he said that himself. Well, he said he's aware of the rumor, yes. But he's also aware, I think I put it even as a leading question, that I don't think anyone has ever come out. I even said it was frustrating because we thought if there was any substance to it, someone would have, at least when this is now the big one, they would have come out. Yeah.
I wonder if I could just ask two things. The first thing you've mentioned again today, the criteria that you're using in this process, and I wonder if we could have a copy of a document, perhaps you have.
No, it's not a document. It's not got nothing to do with anybody. Those questions, that's my question that I put. I didn't say that this is some JSC blueprint. Yeah, that's why I had to ask once again, in line with what I'm saying to Tina, I had to ask the candidate, do you agree about that being the broad issues, leadership and so on? And once the candidate agrees, then I ask them. Yeah, it's
so
not.
Basically, the Commission is not yet of one mind on the criteria.
No. I'm failing. I've said there are criteria in the Constitution. Yes. I said that yesterday. There are criteria that have been set out by the JSC. Yes. However, we're aware that it looks like those criteria have not been properly communicated. Yes. To that extent, after the workshop, we'll find a way as the communications people to make sure that they are posted somewhere so that to put to bed this issue of criteria once and for all. But maybe Commissioner Tsepe wants to add.
No, thank you, Commissioner Mpofu. I think you've covered the last bit that I was going to add, which is over and above the criteria in the Constitution, the JSC set out in a document how to interpret those to flesh out the provision of the Constitution. And this was in 2010, if I recall, Mr. Chilwani. And so what Commissioner Mpofu is saying is we think because there seems to be such a constant retort about not being clear about the criteria for appointing judges, it's perhaps important for the JSC to look at that document during its strategic workshop, and thereafter put it out so that we clearly communicate to the public what we use, because the criteria does exist, and I just want to confirm that. Thank you.
So it's just these criteria at this point, those three issues?
Yeah, well, it's a question. It's not the advocate Pofu's criteria. I don't want to elevate it to that. Yeah, it's questions which I put as my understanding of the three pillars of what a Chief Justice interview would entail, namely the judicial skills and experience, as I said, then people skills and management, and then administration. Yeah. I think anybody knows that those are, and it's not just Chief Justice, by the way, even any judge, president of the SCA, that's the kind of thing we look at. If we're looking for a judge, someone who has to be a judge in the first place, we're not going to ask them so much about their administrative skills, whether they can read the budget, or whether they, because then we're looking for forensic skills, which is a one thing. These are very senior judicial officers. So you can almost take for granted that they have forensic skills, and then you have to check if the other issues are
Have you written that up, perhaps as a draft?
Yeah, I can do it for you. I'll write it out. Yeah, because I've actually not only written it down, but I've also fleshed it out. I can do it like a one-page thing. Yeah.
I'm very appreciative.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, colleagues. I think that's it. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes the media briefing by the JSC commissioners. And still on to the story, Judge President of the Gauteng Division of the High Court, Dustin Mlambo, is in the hot seat today as the Judicial Service Commission interviews candidates for the position of Chief Justice. Mlambo answered various questions pertaining to the law. One of the questions that was put to him was about some of his rulings and judgments that have been perceived to be in favour of President Cyril Ramaphosa and against former President Jacob Zuma. Mlambo says he applied the rule of law in his judgments and says it's completely unfortunate that there's a perception that he's against the former president. Mlambo also explained the CR17 versus the public protector case.